observed a 4th grade English Language Arts inclusion classroom. The class consists of 6 identified special education students and 12 general education students, having an equal amount of boys and girls. I chose to observe this classroom as I knew it consisted of a group of students needing differentiation through the day. The students were working in daily 5 stations when I entered the room, with the teacher working at the guided reading table with a group. Daily 5 is a framework for structuring literacy time so students develop lifelong habits of reading, writing, and working independently. A Daily 5 classroom can produce productive, highly engaged students who are developing a true love of literacy. The benefits of Daily 5 for teachers include: students develop independence and stamina, less time consumed by classroom management leaves more for instruction, it adapts easily to the district curriculum, improves literacy achievement, and student behavior of independent transfers to other core content areas. The Daily 5 stations and process were the teacher table, read to self, read to someone, writing, and computer station. In the course of 30 minutes, the students rotated only one time, hitting 2 stations. At the guided reading table, the 2 different groups I observed were in the process of reading novels. One group was reading Esperanza Rising, and the other group was reading Holes. The groups were reading round-robin style, with the teacher reading and the students taking turns reading pages. The teacher was stopping the students during the reading to discuss vocabulary, context, and meaning at various points to check for understanding. The students were highly engaged in the story, and the ease of answering questions was evident in the amount of interaction with each other in the group and with the teacher. At Read to Self, individual students were reading quietly to themselves in books they had selected from the library. At Read to Someone, students were reading with partners a story from Storyworks magazine on Texas Spanish explorer La Salle. At the computer station, students were working on iStation's interactive reading comprehension program on skills the students showed deficits in during the monthly assessment. At the writing table, students were writing a narrative about a time they discovered a new land called Texas.
Some people might say too. It can say it could always be what?
Like,
They never said you ever been having a bad day and things are going wrong. Someone's like, it could be what?
worse.
It could be worse. It could always be worse.
Or somebody's having a heart attack.
So what she's kind of thinking there, and Isabel kind of made her realize, like, yeah, that's kind of awful, but hey, it could be worse. We used to have to go in the ditch, okay? And so she kind of felt thankful for that. So she's finding those little moments, and you can imagine this is a shock to her having to change her lifestyle so much. Chloe, read 1 or 2.
One half of the front room of the kitchen is still sinking time. Tables and chairs, a pile of wood waited near the stove. Across the room was a mattress on the floor. The bathroom had another mattress. He picked it up and
You finish that, Chuck? Keep going. In between, so it wouldn't take
Simply so it wouldn't look great to be used as a midnight table. Beside touching each bed, above was another small window. Mama looked around and there was home to a weak smell. This is our cabin. Mom went to the kitchen and the phone is out long ago. Is this our cabin? Asked Esperanza, hoping that hers and Bubba's might be better. We are all together in this cabin. Said Mama, someone can't possibly all fit, Esperanza. they will only give one cabin for each man with a family. There's no housing for single women. Single women. This is a family here, so we must have a male head of the household.
JT, get out of the household, please.
And work here, and that is Alfonso. Woman saying sympathetic. Her voice sounded tired. He has told them that we are his kittens, and if anyone asks us, we must say it is true.
Okay, so what does Mama tell? What is Esperanza? Hold on. What is Esperanza hoping?
That's Alfonso and
Right?
yells.
It's a dark cabin, right? It's Alfonso and Hortensia's. And what does Mom tell her?
That it's a family cabin. Like there's no one for a single
Not only is it
woman.
not just theirs, it's all of ours. And what does she say you have to have? What do you have to have in this society? You have to have
A man
leader of the family. Remember, we're starting to read that chapter in social studies about women's rights and all that stuff. She said there is no housing for just single women. We have to have a man of the household to make all this happen. And they're telling a little bit of a what to the people that own the farm?
Lie.
What is that lie?
That they're cousins.
She says, and she tells Esperanza, I told them that we're Alfonso's cousins, and if they ask, you need to say that. Okay? So, her accommodations, if you want to call it that, aren't up to her liking, and she's starting to realize that she has to make these sacrifices. Okay? But now they've kind of opened themselves up with a little bit of lie that she said, because Mama's lied to get them this opportunity. Okay? I want you guys to try. I want y'all to try to log on to BookFlix. Kylie, Dustin, Isaiah, y'all come see me. Let's read some holes. Alright, Superman. Okay. So y'all are supposed to read 14, 15, 16, yes? So let's start on 17. I want y'all to turn to 64. Go to 64. 64. Go to page 64. Julius, Daniel, get on here, please. Okay, so chapter 14. What happened in chapter 14? Remember, before this, Stanley finds a what in the dirt? That could or could not be back.
Gold.
A gold tube with what initial on it? KB. Does he know what that means?
No.
No. And then he had promised previously that if he ever found anything of value, he'd give it to who?
X-ray.
Give it to X-Ray. X-Ray's kind of the leader. So he does. X-Ray wants to take it right away. But then Stanley has a better plan, tells him to do what with it.
Tell do it tomorrow because then you'll be like, I just found it.
Yeah, it makes sense. X-Ray was already almost done with this hole that day. Stanley says, no, save it for tomorrow. Find it early when they first come around, and then you'll get the whole day off. X-Ray likes the idea, so that's what they're doing. Is it not working?
It's not working.
Then you may draw quietly at your desks. So, I'm sorry for the internet issue. So in chapter 14, X-Ray does what? He pretends he what?
He just throws it right there, saying, "Hey, look what I just found."
He pretends he finds it, right? And then he shows Mr. Pendanski, and Mr. Pendanski says what?
The warden like this.
Warden's gonna like this. So who shows up?
The warden. It's actually a lady. Mr. Sturge.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of think that we're reading it, right? You're right.
So Mr. Pendanski was getting out the warden.
I know, but who shows up? Who does he call? He calls the warden shows up. And you're right, when I first read this and heard this story, I expected the warden to be in the can too. But it's a woman.
I watched the video on the weekend, so I had and it said I should have like a black Halloween hat. Black boots and her nails were rubber.
So, how does the warden feel about what has been found?
The KB, the gold tooth with KB on it.
Okay, so how does she feel about that?
Come sit over here because
Is she interested or not?
Yeah, she's really interested. She's like,
She's extremely interested.
y'all get a double shower.
Yeah, she sends X-ray off for a double shower, and then she asks Mr. Kandansky to do what?
Fill up the water.
Chloe, you need to sit at your desk.
And then he talks back to her and says, no, we just did it a few seconds ago. And she's like, and then he was like, yeah, but I just woke up. Excuse me.
So how would
And
you
they get-
describe the warden's personality? She's very
wants to
nice.
shut down.
Yeah, she's not. Yes, exactly.
She's demanding.
She's very motivated. She doesn't have a lot of patience for this. She's interested in this, and she wants this to get started. She's kind of nice to the boys at first, fills up their cans and stuff. But you can just see
Double shower.
right away with her exchange with Mr. Kandansky. Because she tells him, you can either fill up the canteens or you can hit the hole and dig with it. So she's very,
You have a choice.
yeah, she's very mean that way. So she's not the kindest person in the world. Then we jump to 15 here. So she has the boys start digging in what? Partners to dig faster. Now,
And they put Stanley and Zero together, and Stanley's the one running with them.
so do they spread out back to their old holes?
Yes, they switch.
Now they're concentrating on digging where?
A new hole.
Where they found the thing, right?
Yes,
Now, that takes us back. Who actually found it?
Stanley.
Did he find it in that same hole that X-ray said he found it?
No,
So are they digging in the right place?
no.
Okay. So, they're not digging in the right place, and the warden is starting to lose her what? Her what?
She's like, come on, hurry up.
She's starting to lose her
She's
patience.
trying to get Mr. Stern in there, so he'll either dig faster or you get there and let's go.
Yeah, she tells Mr. Sir that if you can't get them to dig any faster, then you can dig the hole. Okay? Here, if you finish what you got now. So the boys are working faster. So she's desperately trying to make this happen. Okay? We see Stanley at the end of chapter 16. Him and Boo are starting to talk in their talks. Zero. Right now, how does he feel towards Zero?
Like, nervous.
Yeah, he doesn't really know what to think of him there. Zero's real quiet. He's always looking over his shoulder.
But he's talking to him sometimes.
And the last thing he says here, Stanley's laughing because his mom kind of made a joke. Remember, Stanley's dad is trying to recycle sneakers. And she says, I feel sorry for her.
And the person who lives in the shoe.
Yeah, the old lady who lived in the shoe, and Stanley kind of laughs to himself.
Because it's definitely like
And Zero doesn't get it.
because y'all know.
Well, I know, but no, we haven't gotten it yet.
I know too. I watched the movie.
Yeah. But he says, the nursery rhyme, the old lady who lived in the shoe.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get it. Zero just kind of stares at it blankly. That's kind of foreshadowing what we're about to learn about Zero. So let's pick up with 17 here.
I only know everything about the movie.
Follow along with me. I'm going to read. I'm going to have you read. It says, for the next week and a half, the boys continued to dig in and around the area where X-ray had supposedly found the gold tooth. They widened X-ray's hole, as well as the holes of Armpit and Squid had been digging, until the fourth day, when all three holes met to form the one big hole. As the days wore on, the warden became less and less patient. She arrived later in the morning and left earlier in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the boys continued to dig later and later. This is no bigger than it was when I left you yesterday, she said after arriving late one morning, well after sunrise. What have you been doing down here? Nothing, said Squid. It was the wrong thing to say. At just that moment, Armpit was returning from the bathroom break. "How nice of you to join us," she said. "And what have you been doing?" "I had to, go." The warden jabbed at Armpit with her pitchfork, knocking him backward into the big hole. The pitchfork left 3 holes in the front of his shirt and 3 tiny spots of blood. "You're giving these boys too much water," the warden told Mr. Finansky. So again, we see the warden angry.
That's her fault. They said, so they're casting again, but she overdid it.
Yeah, sure. Too ashamed she was. She wanted them to have plenty of water, and then she's like, "You're giving too much." So
Because when he found that, she was like, "Yeah, this is so good. We're about to get." She said it was prize. It's like a party.
yeah,
And then now she's like, "Why can't we find anything? Cut down their water."
yeah, she was excited. Now so it's kind of fake. They continued to dig until late afternoon, long after the other groups had finished for the day. Stanley was down in the big hole, along with the other 6 boys. Then they had stopped using the wheelbarrows. He dug his shovel into the side of the hole. He scooped up some dirt and was raising it to the surface when Zigzag's shovel caught him on the side of the head and collapsed. He wasn't sure if he passed out or not. He looked up to see Zigzag's wild head staring down at him. "I ain't digging that dirt up," Zigzag said. "That's your dirt." "Hey, Mom," Magnet called. "Caveman's been hurt." Stanley brought his fingers to the side of his neck. He felt his wet blood and a pretty big gash just below his ears. Magnet helped Stanley to his feet, then up and out of the hole. Mr. Sir made a bandage out of a piece of sack with sunflower seeds and taped it over Stanley's wound. Then he told them to get back to work. "It isn't nap time." When Stanley returned to the hole, Zigzag was waiting for him. "That's your dirt," Zigzag said. "You have to dig it up. It's covering up my dirt." Stanley felt a little dizzy. He could see a small pile of dirt. It took him a moment to realize it was the dirt which had been on his shovel when he was hit. He scooped it up, then Zigzag dug his shovel into the ground underneath, where Stanley's dirt had been. So what happens to Stanley recently?
He got hurt by his shovel, and up here's bleeding.
Which is pretty nasty, right? I mean, you got hit, but how did Zigzag react?
You better move your stuff right now. He's being mean. It's gonna be a him then. What that was him right there.
Is he mean?
So he should, yeah. Kind of mean, sort of. Kind of. He's like
Yeah, he's
trying to make it like an argument.
He's kind of being cold. But you have to realize, even though these kids have a kind of bond, they all have nicknames, there's kind of order to it. That kind of showed you that when things get tough or when you really boil it down, everyone's really just looking out for who? Themselves, right? If that happened, our natural reaction would be like, "Oh my gosh," we try to help him. He immediately just is like, "Nope, that's not my dirt, that's your dirt, you do that, I'll do," Immediately you saw that division there. He thinks he's becoming part of the family there, and he is on some level, but you have to understand, they're basically in what?
And groups, like,
They're basically in what?
walks out, like,
Hmm?
they won't be like kind to their.
But what is Camp Remus? He could have gone to jail or he could have gone to Camp Remus. So he's basically in all that.
Digging holes, jail.
He's basically in jail. He's basically in prison.
But
Okay?
that jail is worse than regular jail.
So you saw immediately there, kind of, everyone's looking out for themselves. Especially in that. You saw that division. Follow along with me on page 80, we're on chapter 18.
Like, he doesn't want to help improve it. He was just like,
Yeah, he
do it here right now.
That's cool. The next morning, Mr. Sir marched the boys to another section of the lake, and each boy dug his own hole, 5 feet deep, 5 feet wide. Stanley was glad to be away from the big hole. At least now he knew just how much he had to dig for the day. And it was a relief not to have other shovels swinging past his face or the warden coming around. He dug his shovel into the dirt, then slowly turned to dump it into a pile. He had to make his turn smooth and slow. If he jerked too quickly, he felt a throbbing pain just above his neck where Zigzag's shovel had hit him. The part of his head between his neck and ear was considerably swollen. There were no mirrors in camp. He imagined he looked like he had a hard-boiled egg sticking out of him. The remainder of his body hardly hurt at all. His muscle had strengthened, his hands had calloused. So what other physical changes he's still going through? All of a sudden he's what?
Getting stronger.
He's stronger, he's not sore. Remember I talked about this calluses on your hands?
There's like
His hands aren't blistering up, so his body's getting used to it. But his neck is hurt, so he has to, when he's digging, do what? Chloe.
Slowly and
Do I need to find
swiftly,
something else for
so
you to
it
do?
doesn't hurt his back. Slowly and
Yeah, he's got to do it smooth, you know, he's kind of ginger there. But he's glad to be what?
That lad that zigzag.
But he's glad to be where? Where are they digging now?
Oh, bigger now what side?
Yeah, now they're back to what he was used to now, because when they were digging that big hole,
It was
did
gonna
they-
be harder.
yeah, they were just digging constantly. They didn't even know how big it was supposed to be. They're looking for something, but they don't know what they're looking for.
I know.
Dustin, repay dating my point.
He was still a slow and bigger, but not all that much slower. When Magnus less than 13 minutes after Magnus returned to camp, Stanley back to the hole after his shower. He put his dirty clothes in the trash
Great.
crate and got out a box. Stationery. He stayed in the tent to write letters to Squid,
So sweet.
so Squid and the other boys would make fun of him for writing to his mother. Yeah, and camp is hard, but challenging. We've been learning
Obstacle course.
obstacles and have to swim long distances on the lake to tomorrow. We learn
Okay, stop right there. They've showed us a couple of letters he's written to his mom. What does he tell his parents about?
his life to
He makes it sound like it's a lot.
fun. More fun instead of challenges to digging holes the whole day, but yeah.
He makes it sound like it's a lot better than it really is. He makes it sound like he's at an actual camp. Now, why would he do that?
Because he doesn't want his parents to take him down. He will students get more trouble and it is worse.
They don't want, yeah, he doesn't want his parents to worry about him. So everything he writes, he's always like, "Oh, Mom, the food's great. And, you know, we were running obstacle courses and swimming on the lake." You know, he's making this up. to
There
make it
is a
sound.
lake, but there's no water. They're just
Oh.
digging on. But where do they get that water if it's miles away?
Keep going, Dustin.
See, he stopped writing and Zero walked to the desk. Then returned to his lesson. He didn't care what Zero thought. Zero was your way. To rock climb. I know that sounds scary, but don't worry. Zero was down beside him. Now watching his right. Then turned left.
What's up?
Felt his neck throb. I don't like it. Zero.
Hold on, you skipped one of them. I don't like it when you.
I don't like it. Ring over my shoulder. Zero said nothing. Don't be careful. It's not all fun and games here, but I think I'm getting a lot out of it. Bills, the other boys, I don't know what said Zero was.
I don't know how, said Zero. What? He thinks Zero is doing what over short.
Reading, but he can't.
Reading his letters doesn't work. Zero says, I don't know how. Can you teach me? Stanley didn't know what he was talking about. Teach you what? To rock climb? Zero stared at him with penetrating eyes. What? Said Stanley. He was hot, tired, and sore. I want to learn to read and write, said Zero. Stanley let out a short laugh. He wasn't laughing at Zero. He was just surprised. All this time, he thought Zero was reading over his shoulder. Sorry, he said. I don't know how to teach. After digging all day, he didn't have the strength to try to teach Zero to read and write. He needed to save his energy for the people who counted. You don't have to teach me to write, said Zero, just to read. I don't have anybody to write to. Sorry, Stanley said again. His muscles and hands weren't the only parts of his body that had toughened over the past several weeks. His heart had hardened as well. He finished his letter. He barely had enough moisture in his mouth to seal the stamp in the envelope. It seemed that no matter how much water he drank, he was always thirsty. So we talked about some physical changes. He's stronger. He doesn't listen to his hands anymore. What kind of emotional change has he gone through? No, that's physical. But let's think about that. When it says, hold on, I want to read this. You're right when you think about the hardness. His heart had hardened as well. Now, do they mean like his heart is now physically?
No, it's just like
Exactly. So what it's saying is, it's almost like when you call someone cold-hearted or like icy. It's like he's starting to lose his relationship to people, his good qualities. Because what kind of person is Stanley?
a nice person, but
He's a nice guy. Did he even steal those shoes?
no.
He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's been nothing but helpful. I mean,
I know.
he's a great person, but Zero asked him to read and write. Maybe the old Stanley would have said what?
Yes.
Sure.
Sure, why not?
But this Stanley that's sore and tired and kind of broken from this experience tells him what?
No, not right now. Bye-bye.
So sorry, I don't know how to teach. Okay, so he's kind of shutting him out. But now we learned that Zero can't what?
Read.
Can't read and write. And that's why everyone thinks, Chloe, I need you to clear up your desk, get on the airboat. So, everyone at the camp thinks Zero is what?
No, dumb.
Dumb. They call him Zero because he's got nothing in his head. Everyone's written that kid off. Okay?
If he never said anything.
That's what they call him. Okay? Chapter 19. Follow on with me in A3. He was awakened one night by a strange noise. At first he thought it might have been some kind of animal, and it frightened him. But as the sleep cleared from his head, he realized that the noise was coming from the cot next to him. Squid was crying. You okay? Stanley whispered. Squid's head jerked around. He sniffed and caught his breath. Yeah, I'm fine, he whispered and he sniffed again. In the morning, Stanley asked Squid if he was feeling better. What are you, my mother? Asked Squid. Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. I got allergies, okay? Squid said. Okay, said Stanley. You open your mouth again and I'll break your jaw. So he wakes up to find who? Squid crying, okay? And then Squid gets very wet. It's very, that's called being defensive. He gets very defensive whenever he starts questioning about it. Yeah, that's right. Isaiah, read page 84. Follow along with us.
Stanley kept his mouth shut both of the time. He didn't talk to any of the boys. Wait, I'm being afraid that he's not say that. I explained things. It's off the They called him Peter and all that. He couldn't forget that there would be Peter. They would all appear for a reason. As Mr. Spider-Man would say, this song would go now. Sally was thankful that there were no problems. Peter, Arkin, and Hero or blank. That's my nice. He went and looked at white and were Hispanic. They were actually for now we have to say plain reddish brown color. The color of their first one is gold and Is that page to that? Yes, it does. The canteen was still almost a quarter full. He wanted to go down and behind my the air was heat, dust, and dust.
Stop speed.
Mr. Servo, their canteen. The truck pulled away, finally holding back.
As I observed the dynamics of the classroom, you could tell the teacher had structured a routine in place for daily. 5. The students moved quickly when rotating to their next station and were working quietly the entire time. At the guided reading table, the teacher used a voice that was soothing but intriguing to the students. He used good questioning and made good references to the real world. He discussed character traits and how the characters were adapting throughout the story. He even asked the students why a character was named a certain name. I could easily tell the students were used to this type of interaction at the guided reading table with their teacher, as they were relaxed and able to share freely. As this is an inclusion classroom, the students were not faced by having another person in the room and went about their jobs as I observed. The guided reading lessons were the best part of my observation in this 4th grade classroom. The students were truly interested in the novel the teacher had chosen for them to read and were more than willing to participate in conversation with the teacher when he asked questions. The Read to Someone and the Writing Stations integrated social studies TEKS within the ELA TEKS, while the Read to Self and Computer Station supported skills within the ELA content. I was pleased with what I observed overall. At the guided reading table, the teacher worked with 2 different ability level groups using novels that were both interesting and challenging to the students. The first group of students was a high ability group. These students read with expression, which helped make the story come alive. The teacher used higher order thinking skills to extend the students' comprehension and vocabulary. When he stopped the students to engage in conversation, he intentionally asked different students to share their thoughts for each question, not showing favoritism for either gender or ethnicity. The teacher drew on the students' background to make connections to the story. The second group of students was a low ability group consisting of 2 identified special education students and a student who had not received formal schooling until this year. The teacher modeled good reading using expression and intonation as he started the next chapter in the book with the group. He then called on different students to read aloud, assisting them with difficult words as needed. This group's fluency was choppy and lacked expression because decoding larger multisyllable words was difficult. The teacher, however, did not lower his expectations as he continued to ask higher order questions to further the understanding of this group. I liked the way he used scaffolding for differentiation with the lower ability group by modeling good reading and providing support when the students read. The teacher was successful with both reading groups as the students really were engaged and understanding of the text was evident in their answers to open-ended questions. I would have liked to see more review of sections previously read and an introduction of difficult terminology before students started reading this selection for the day. I would have also liked for there to be an activity related to the daily selection for the students to work on to support the day's understanding. Activities could have included a retell of character analysis before the reading. Also, I might have reminded the students between rotations of my expectations and each station's requirements. In conclusion, as this was an observation video, there was not a way I could have contributed to the outcome of the lesson. The students' behavior during the lesson was highly engaged for most of the time they spent during a rotation. Students at the Read to Self station were busy reading their own selections, while at the Read to Someone station, students were reading and talking sporadically. At the Writing station, students had a difficult time getting started with the story and staying interested in writing about being an explorer. At the Computer station, students were busy reading or working on skills selected for them for mastery. These students could have benefited more from their own learning if they would have stayed focused on the tasks the teachers had put together for them. The teacher did a great job at the guided reading table using good questioning during the group, but the students really could have used a retell of the previous lection before beginning the lesson and then an activity after the lesson to solidify the lesson. If I was doing a formal observation, these are a couple of things I would have made note for the teacher to approve upon. The overall outcome of the observation event was a class that has good classroom managed procedures for stations in place and a teacher who understands the importance of guided reading at a 4th grade level for a depth of understanding.